what I learned about trauma and other serious things is that these big experiences shatter a set of assumptions that we've made about ourselves and the world that we didn't know were there. Once we've assumed something, we don't think about it anymore because we assume that it'll be there. We actually, deep down, all assume we'll live forever, don't we? And that gives our lives a focus in the future. And that means our attachments to our loved ones, our family, even our community, friends, are somehow anchored inside us into a set of internal structures that correspond with what's out there. That's what falling in love is. You kind of take that person inside and they inhabit you. So for our children, etc. And what we have to think about is all of our experiences start to get oriented and modelled around this structure, this organisation we've got. So the purpose, the meaning, the sense of who we are, all becomes linked up with these connections. So when one of those people die, even if it's a sort of known death, terminal illness, plenty of time, say goodbye in a beautiful way, doesn't matter. When it's happened, we've got a major problem. The external world no longer corresponds to the internal world. And that's a curiously painful thing. The pain of that is very hard to articulate. Because it's not just the loss, it's the consequences of the loss. Now, we can't come to those in the early stages of a loss. That unfolds over years. Usually people go into, as Geraldine Brooks, was it, that you read out, you go into automatic mode. You have to organise a funeral, you have to deal with wills, you have to talk to family, etc. And in many ways, that's a kind of automatic structure in our lives that now becomes disconnected from these deeper structures which our emotions and our sense of self are linked to. It's absolutely inevitable that it takes, I would say, years for the consequence of the grief to slowly unfold. As Geraldine found, when she was very busy doing things, she had to at some point go away and grieve. Actually, we know that one of the most important things... Is that any better? Is it on?
I should be like a rock star. Sorry about that. You know, our mind and body are really part of one complicated system. I'm not saying that the mind is only the body, but they're really importantly connected. If we don't register things in our body, they don't become real. That's a really important principle. So that part of the grief experience is this very same thing that people apologise for. The tears, the crying, the howling, the whatever we need to do. And, you know, some people feel very inhibited from doing that. I've learned in my psychotherapy practice that women have an advantage over men. They've got a secret weapon. They cry in the shower. And they come out looking as though they're fine, but they really let their grief be expressed. Other people will cry in the car and shout and scream and swear. It's really not saying that that venting is a solution, but it's a way of making it real, because the first response is the external world doesn't correspond to the internal world, and the internal world is what I'm familiar with, so I can't really accept it, it's not real. And we see that it takes a whole series of processes as the knowledge of the death percolates through. So to begin with, we feel very upset because they're not here immediately. And then we start to build a new routine in which, we'll not expect them to be there, and we won't expect them to be there in the morning or whatever it is. And then people find, as I've worked with people, they say, I get really sad at around about 5 o'clock. What normally happened at 5 o'clock? That's the time my husband would have come home. And they often don't realise that until we think about it. And then gradually they get used to that, and they're not sort of unconsciously waiting for them anymore. They know they're not going to come home. And then at another level, they say they had a very upsetting experience. They were in a shopping centre and they thought they glimpsed the back of his head, which showing that there's part of them that's saying, hasn't really taken it on board, is saying, they must be around here somewhere, haven't seen him for a long time. Oh, that must be him. No, it's not. Oh, that must be him. No, it's not. And you see there's a sort of an expectation, a searching, a looking. And gradually it takes time for that to go through. And in many ways, the only way we take it on board is by being disappointed every time and coming back to reality. That means that early grief rituals are really important. And being able to help people think about the death and to talk about the death. So that it starts to get taken in a more productive way. So it's very important that we understand that people do grief very differently. You probably come across Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's name. She's a very interesting woman. I remember going to her workshops back in the 70s when she came out here. But she did her work with people who were dying themselves. So her stages that are so popular now are really about how a person comes to grips with their own death. Now, there's a lot of sense in those stages, and we don't have time to go into them, but I encourage you to check them out. But they are not a rigid sequence. They are a set of processes that people have to go through. And what's been found with the research is that actually everybody's got their own journey. And some people will do it easily, and some people will take a long time and do it very hard. But what's important is that there's a series of processes to go through. And what we find is that it's very, very helpful for people to be able to feel free to express themselves, to speak freely and openly about what it all means. I'm working at the moment with some parents who lost a child in unexpected circumstances. They're very, very sad. They know when they come in to me they can cry, and we go through half a box of tissues nearly every session. And this is one of the places where they can just be free to say whatever they like. And if you listen carefully to what they're saying, they're actually talking about all the implications and consequences of this, all the little things that they find that are upsetting or are not the same. And this talking is very important. Not everyone needs to see counsellors. The time to see a counsellor is when you feel, I feel so bad I can't deal with life, or I feel I'm stuck and I'm not moving through it, because there'll always be reasons for that. And it's very helpful to talk to someone with training to help to tease that out. Ross might be going to speak about that in a minute, but what's also important is to be able to have a place where you come and check in, and you want to explain to your counsellor what's been happening. And that's probably the only time you really take an inventory of what's been going on and start to put it all together. So I think what's important in this regard is to understand it's not just about expressing yourself, it's being able to have a space to think and reflect on what it means. Some people are very articulate, they can explain it. Other people have a great struggle finding the words. And it's very helpful to just take time with them to help them find those words. To what's the name of that feeling? What's the name of this feeling? Because what we have to do in the grief process is first of all get out of that numbness where I can't make sense of it. And our numbness is we call it the state of psychological arousal, when I'm dealing with a distressing and disturbing experience that I'm struggling to work it all out. Most people will say, and I've got to function, so I'll put everything aside and do what I have to do. And that's the sort of first stage that we could call it shock, if you like. Now, some people will take a long time to come out of that. What's really helpful is to relinquish some of those demands. So the strategies of, bringing casseroles to people and just leaving them outside the front door, knocking on the door and going away, so they don't have to come and talk to us if they don't want to. And helping with all sorts of practical forms of assistance. People often have trouble even doing things like paying bills, or family members could come around and say, look, I'll take all that on. Because that relinquishes their requirement to engage with the physical world, and they can give themselves space. The second thing that's really needed is to be able to express whatever the grief means. Now, some people say it's too painful to go to the cemetery. The couple I'm working with go to the cemetery, spread a rug out, lie down and cry. And it's very sad, but it's somehow comforting afterwards when they come away. And what they're doing is they're having this combination of acknowledging their child that's died and accepting that the death is there. And so this is then followed by a period, this period is often the period where there's a lot of emotional reaction coming out of the numbness and people feel really upset. And then I say that the first year is really difficult because you've got to do every ritualistic part of the year anew. Birthdays, Christmases, festivals, everything has to be reinvented, and that's very hard. It's very important that people be encouraged to stop and think, oh, we're coming up to the birthday. How would you like to do that? What would be meaningful? Try and get the family together and have a bit of a plan about how you're going to do it. Think about it, think ahead, rather than suddenly find yourself there. And every step of this process is very important. It's when you get to the second year, you're doing it for the second time. Now what people will sometimes say, that feels worse than the first year. It probably isn't worse, but they're feeling it more. And that's the beginning, I think, of the longer recovery process. And what community members and friends can do is listen, be there. Don't go up to them and say, how are you feeling? Because they don't want to say, terrible still, absolutely terrible, and I'm going to feel terrible as far as I can see for a very long time. So it's not information, is it? No, what you can say is, it's very nice to see you. What are you doing? How can I help? Etc., etc. Try and have the conversation about something they can talk about. And in that sense, the moment they sense you're in tune, they can start to relax. Somebody gets it. Because there'll be many people in their environment who will be not able to get it or offering well-intentioned, misguided advice. And for them, they've got to sort of, put their problem aside and deal with that. So, patience. Don't underestimate the simple act of listening and understanding. It'll be priceless for those people going through it. So, thanks very much.